Agent Zorax sat alone in his small spacecraft, reviewing the Council files on Earth one last time. The blue planet grew larger in his view screen as he approached. This was to be his most challenging mission yet. Agent Zorax, the recorded message from Council leader Vex played. Earth requires immediate assessment. Their technological progress is accelerating beyond our predictions. You are to observe and report on their true capabilities and intentions. Zorax sighed, running three-fingered hands over his face before activating his DNA modifier. Pain shot through his body as his alien features melted away, replaced by human characteristics. 2 eyes instead of 4, 5 fingers instead of 3, and peach-colored skin covering his normally blue flesh. When the transformation finished, a human man named Frank Miller existed where Zorax had been. The Council's Intelligence Division had created this identity carefully. A 35-year-old software consultant who could move between companies without raising suspicion. Remember, the message continued, humans are classified as a potential threat species. They've moved from primitive combustion engines to basic space travel in less than a century. Their violent tendencies and resource consumption patterns matched those of civilizations that later became galactic threats. Frank checked his Earth clothing, jeans, a button-up shirt, and a jacket, all perfectly ordinary. The Council had studied human fashion extensively to ensure their agents wouldn't stand out. His ship automatically entered Earth's atmosphere under cover of night, using stealth technology to avoid detection by the primitive but surprisingly effective human radar systems. It landed in a forested area outside a city called Portland. Your mission duration is 12 Earth months, Council leader Vex explained in the recording. You will integrate into their society, observe their technological capabilities, military strategies, and social structures. Most importantly, determine if they pose a threat to galactic stability. Frank stepped out of his ship, which immediately camouflaged itself to look like a cluster of boulders. The cool night air felt strange against his newly formed human skin. Earth's gravity was slightly stronger than his home planet, making his movements feel heavy and awkward. He checked his equipment one last time. Identity documents, Earth currency, a communication device disguised as a smartphone, and his emergency beacon. The mission briefing had stressed that emergency extraction would only be approved under the most extreme circumstances. Walking through the forest toward the city lights in the distance, Frank rehearsed his cover story. Born in Chicago, moved frequently due to his consulting work, no close family ties, a perfect explanation for any small social mistakes he might make while adapting to human behavior. As he reached the road where his prearranged transportation waited, Frank couldn't shake a feeling of unease. The Council had studied Earth for decades, but only from a distance. This was the first deep cover mission to gather intelligence from within human society. The self-driving vehicle recognized his biometric signature and opened its door. As Frank settled into the seat, the car began moving toward the apartment that had been secured for him. Final instruction. Council leader Vex's voice concluded from his communicator. Remember that humans are unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Their history is filled with violence and conquest. Trust no one. Maintain your cover at all costs. The security of the Galactic Council depends on accurate intelligence about this emerging species. Frank watched the unfamiliar landscape pass by his window. Tomorrow he would begin his new human job, meet his human neighbors, and start building the network of connections that would give him access to the information the Council needed. What none of them knew was that this mission would change everything, not just for Frank, but for humanity and the Galactic Council itself. Frank Miller's first week on Earth passed in a blur of new experiences. He moved into his apartment on the 4th floor of a modern building near downtown Portland. The Council had chosen this location because it offered access to technology companies while still being a typical human living space. On his first morning, Frank stood in front of his bathroom mirror, practicing human facial expressions. Smiling felt unnatural, his lips stretching in ways that made his new face feel strange. The council training had emphasized that humans smiled frequently, often without reason. "Hello, I'm Frank Miller," he practiced saying, trying to make his voice sound casual. "I'm new in town." His first real human interaction came that afternoon. As he struggled to carry groceries from his car, someone called out behind him, "Need a hand with those?" Frank turned to see a woman with short brown hair and a friendly face. According to his cultural database, she appeared to be in her mid-30s. "I'm Susan Parker from apartment 4C, she said, taking one of the bags from his arms before he could respond. "You must be my new neighbor." "Frank Miller," he replied, remembering to smile. "Just moved in yesterday." Susan helped him carry the groceries to his door, chatting easily about the building and neighborhood. Frank carefully observed her behavior, noting the way she maintained eye contact and asked questions about his background. "So what brings you to Portland?" she asked. Frank recited his prepared answer. "Work. I'm a software consultant. Just got assigned to a project here." "Well, welcome to the building," Susan said. "We have a little community here. Most of us get together for drinks, sometimes on the rooftop deck. You should join us." Frank thanked her, making a mental note to research appropriate social behaviors for such gatherings. After she left, he immediately recorded his observations in his hidden communication device. "Humans initiate social contact readily," he reported. "They offer assistance to strangers without obvious benefit to themselves." Further observation needed to determine if this behavior masks ulterior motives. On Monday, Frank began his job at Omnitech Solutions, a mid-sized company that developed security software. The council had arranged this placement specifically because the company had government contracts, which might provide valuable intelligence on Earth's defense capabilities. His supervisor, Alan Rogers, was a broad-shouldered man with a loud laugh who seemed genuinely pleased to have Frank on his team. "Your resume is impressive," Alan said, showing Frank to his workstation. "We could use someone with your experience on the encryption project." Frank spent the day observing his coworkers as much as the computer systems. He noticed how they joked with each other, shared food, and discussed their personal lives openly. None of this matched the council's description of humans as guarded and primarily competitive. That evening, Frank composed another report. Human workplace structures appear less hierarchical than council intelligence suggested. Collaboration seems valued over competition. Humans readily share information and resources with minimal security protocols. By the end of his second week, Frank had established a daily routine. He worked at Omnitech during the day, occasionally joined Susan and other neighbors for social activities, and spent his evenings analyzing what he'd learned. The most puzzling discovery was how different actual humans were from the council's descriptions. Where was the aggressive, selfish species he had been warned about? These humans seemed helpful, sociable, and surprisingly trusting. Frank's latest report concluded with a question he never thought he'd ask. Is it possible our intelligence on humans has been fundamentally flawed from the beginning? Frank's third month on Earth brought unexpected challenges to his mission. One rainy morning, his supervisor Alan stopped by his desk with an exciting announcement. "Frank, I've got good news. The defense contract proposal you helped with. We got it. The team is celebrating at Murphy's Pub tonight." Frank nodded politely while his mind raced. This development would give him access to classified military systems, exactly the kind of intelligence the council wanted. Yet he felt strangely conflicted. "I'll be there," he promised, forcing a smile. That evening, Frank joined his coworkers at the pub. The atmosphere was warm and lively, with people laughing and sharing stories. Alan handed Frank a beer and raised his glass. To Frank, the new guy who's already proving invaluable. Everyone cheered. Frank felt an odd sensation in his chest, something like pride, but mixed with discomfort. These humans were treating him as part of their group, unaware that he was studying them as potential threats. Later that night, back in his apartment, Frank prepared his monthly report to the council. He sat at his hidden communication device and began typing. Defense contract acquired as planned. Will gain access to strategic systems within weeks. He paused, fingers hovering over the keys. According to protocol, he should provide a detailed assessment of human military capabilities and intentions, but something made him hesitate. Human defense systems remain primitive compared to Council standards. He continued carefully. Their security protocols are basic. He deliberately omitted mentioning the innovative encryption methods he had seen developed by his team, approaches that even the Council might find challenging to break. The next day, Susan invited Frank to join a community cleanup event at a local park. "It's just picking up trash and planting some trees," she explained. "But it's fun, and you'll meet some nice people." Frank agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to observe human social structures. What he witnessed confused him further. Dozens of humans gathered early Saturday morning, wearing work clothes and carrying tools. They organized themselves efficiently without any clear hierarchy. Children worked alongside adults, elderly people directed younger volunteers, and strangers cooperated without complaint. A young man named Paul worked beside Frank, planting saplings that wouldn't mature for decades. "Why do you do this?" Frank asked. "You won't benefit from these trees." Paul looked surprised. "Maybe not directly, but someone will. My grandkids might sit under these trees someday. Besides, it feels good to make things better, you know." Frank didn't know, but he nodded anyway. That evening, he sat again at his communication device. His training required him to report on human resource management and long-term planning capabilities. But how could he explain what he'd seen today? Humans investing time and energy in projects that would only benefit future generations seemed irrational by Council standards. Instead, he wrote, "Humans continue to demonstrate expected short-term thinking and self-interest." Frank was beginning to understand that his reports were becoming less accurate. He was selectively sharing information, protecting these humans who had welcomed him without question. In his private journal, one the Council would never see, he wrote his true thoughts. "The Council believes humans are dangerous because of their technological progress and resource consumption. But they're missing something important. These people show a capacity for selflessness and cooperation that our models don't account for." As he prepared for bed, Frank realized with growing unease that his loyalty was becoming divided. For the first time in his career as a Council agent, he was questioning his mission. Frank was working late at Omnitech when the first signs of trouble appeared. His computer screen flickered unexpectedly, then went dark for several seconds before coming back online. Around him, other employees experienced the same issue. "Server problem?" Frank asked Alan, who was frowning at his own screen. "Doesn't look like it," Alan replied. "It's happening everywhere. Check the news." Frank opened a news website and felt his heart sink. Reports were coming in from across the globe about electronic disturbances, communication failures, and strange atmospheric readings. To most humans, it seemed like an unusual but explainable technical glitch or weather phenomenon. But Frank recognized the signs immediately. Proxians, one of the most dangerous predator species in the galaxy. Frank excused himself and hurried to the bathroom, locking himself in a stall. He activated his emergency communicator, bypassing normal channels to reach Council command directly. "Agent Zorax reporting urgent situation. Proxian scout signals detected on Earth. Request immediate guidance." The response came quickly. "Confirm Proxian signature pattern." Frank sent the data from his scanner. There was no doubt. The energy fluctuations matched Proxian technology perfectly. He knew what this meant. Proxians were advanced scouts for a harvesting fleet that would strip Earth of resources and either enslave or eliminate its population. The Council's response chilled him. Confirmation received. Maintain observation protocols. Non-intervention directive applies. Continue standard reporting. Frank read the message twice, unable to believe what he was seeing. The Council was aware that Proxians had targeted Earth but would do nothing to help. According to galactic law, Earth was an unaffiliated world, not yet part of the interstellar community and therefore not protected by Council defense treaties. He sent another message. Request clarification. Proxian harvest operation will result in complete human extinction or enslavement. The answer was coldly efficient. Understood. Natural selection event. Continue mission parameters. Natural selection event. The Council's clinical term for the destruction of a developing civilization. Frank felt sick. When he returned to his desk, his colleagues were discussing the strange occurrences. Military saying it's just solar flare activity. Alan was telling the team, nothing to worry about. It's happening too regularly to be solar flares, said Diane from the security team. And it's affecting systems that should be hardened against that kind of thing. Frank listened silently, his mind racing. The humans had no idea what was coming. Within months, perhaps weeks, Proxian ships would appear in Earth's skies. Humans might fight bravely, but without advanced technology or knowledge of Proxian weaknesses, they would have no chance. That night, Frank couldn't sleep. He paced his apartment, weighing his options. Helping Earth would mean betraying the Council, the organization he had served faithfully for decades. It would mean exile at best, execution at worst. But doing nothing meant watching these people die. Susan, Alan, Paul, and billions of others. People who had shown him kindness, who planted trees for future generations, who celebrated their small victories together. Frank's communicator beeped with a standard check-in message. Report status, Agent Zorax. He stared at the device for a long moment before typing. Status normal. Continuing observation. It was the first direct lie he had ever told his superiors. Frank sat down at his kitchen table and began making notes, not for the Council, but for humanity. He listed Proxian weaknesses, tactical patterns, and technological vulnerabilities. If humans had any chance of survival, they would need this information. Tomorrow, he would commit treason against the Galactic Council. Frank knocked on Susan's door at exactly 7:30 p.m. His hands were shaking slightly as he held the folder containing everything he had prepared. When she opened the door, her usual smile quickly faded as she saw his serious expression. Frank, is everything okay? I need to talk to you, he said quietly. It's important, very important. Susan invited him in, concern evident on her face. What's going on? You look terrible. Frank took a deep breath. There was no easy way to do this. Susan, I'm not who you think I am. I'm not even what you think I am. She stared at him, confused. What are you talking about? I'm not human, Frank said simply. The words hung in the air between them. Susan laughed nervously. Okay. Is this some kind of joke? Instead of answering, Frank concentrated on his right hand, allowing it to partially revert to its natural form. His fingers elongated, the skin turning a faint blue, the number of digits reducing from 5 to 3. Susan gasped and stepped back, knocking over a lamp in her haste. What? How are you? My real name is Zorax, he explained, returning his hand to human form. I was sent here by an organization called the Galactic Council to study humans. But that's not important now. What's important is that Earth is in danger. Over the next hour, Frank explained everything. The Proxians, their harvesting operations, the Council's non-intervention policy, and the signs already appearing worldwide. To his surprise, once Susan moved past her initial shock, she listened carefully, asking pointed questions that showed she was taking him seriously. Why are you telling me this? She finally asked. Aren't you betraying your people? Yes, Frank admitted, but I can't stand by and watch yours be destroyed. The Council is wrong about humans. You deserve a chance to defend yourselves. Susan was quiet for a long moment. We need to tell others, people who can actually do something with this information. That's why I came to you, Frank said. I need someone humans will trust. You know people, you're respected in your community. I can provide the information, but you need to help me get it to the right people. Susan nodded slowly. Alan at your work. He has a brother in military intelligence, and my cousin works for NASA. We can start with them. We need to be careful, Frank warned. If the Council discovers what I'm doing, they'll extract me immediately and erase all evidence, including anyone I've spoken to about this. You're risking your life, Susan said, the realization dawning on her face. Frank nodded. Yes, but so will everyone on this planet if we do nothing. Over the next 3 days, Susan and Frank carefully expanded their circle of confidence. First Alan, whose initial disbelief turned to determined action once Frank demonstrated his alien abilities. Then Susan's cousin Kevin at NASA, who connected them with scientists studying the atmospheric disturbances. Each new person reacted differently to learning Frank's true identity. Some were terrified, others fascinated, but all understood the gravity of the threat he described. A small group began to form: scientists, military personnel, government officials with sufficient clearance, all working in secret to prepare Earth's defenses. In Kevin's basement, converted into a makeshift command center, Frank shared everything he knew about Proxian technology and tactics. Their ships are vulnerable to electromagnetic pulses, he explained, drawing diagrams, and they rely heavily on centralized command structures. As he watched these humans absorb and adapt his information, developing countermeasures with their limited technology, Frank felt something he'd never experienced before: pride in a species not his own. Why are you really helping us? A military officer named Greg asked him bluntly one evening. Frank considered the question carefully. Because you're better than the Council believes, and I think you deserve to exist. Within 2 weeks, Earth's secret defense network was growing. Frank marveled at how quickly humans adapted to the reality of alien threats. Instead of panicking, they organized. Susan had proven herself an excellent coordinator, using her connections in education to identify trustworthy scientists without raising suspicion. Alan's military contacts provided secure communication channels and access to defense infrastructure. Kevin from NASA helped interpret the increasing Proxian scout signals detected in Earth's atmosphere. Frank sat in a converted warehouse that now served as their main planning center. Around him, dozens of humans worked at computer stations, analyzing data and developing countermeasures based on his knowledge of Proxian technology. The Chinese government has agreed to cooperate, Greg announced, hanging up a secure phone. They're redirecting their electromagnetic research to weapon applications as we suggested. The Russians are on board too, said Diane, who had joined their group after Frank revealed his true identity to the Omnitech security team. Their space program is modifying satellites to act as early warning systems. Frank watched in amazement. In just 14 days, traditional enemies were sharing resources and information. Political differences had been set aside in the face of extinction. The Council would never believe this, he murmured to Susan, who was reviewing deployment plans nearby. They were convinced humans would fragment under pressure, fighting among themselves even as external threats mounted. We do that sometimes, Susan admitted, but we can also come together when it really matters. That afternoon, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A young engineer named Jack had been experimenting with Frank's descriptions of Proxian communication systems. I think I've got something, Jack announced, waving Frank over to his workstation. Their ships use quantum-paired signals to communicate, right? What if we created noise on those specific frequencies? Frank studied Jack's design, remarkably sophisticated for Earth technology, yet simple enough to be mass-produced quickly. This could work, Frank said, excitement building in his voice. If we can disrupt their communications, it would give us a significant advantage. How long to prototype? Greg asked. 3 days with the components we have, Jack replied. Frank's communicator vibrated in his pocket. A Council check-in. He stepped outside to respond, crafting his message carefully. Continuing observation. Humans remain unaware of Proxian presence. No significant defensive preparations detected. Each lie to the Council felt easier than the last. Frank's loyalty had shifted completely. When he returned, Susan was organizing teams to begin distributing the jamming technology globally. We're using shipping companies, private planes, diplomatic pouches, anything to get these devices deployed worldwide without raising alarms, she explained. Frank nodded approvingly. The Proxians will expect centralized resistance. Distributed defense networks will confuse their tactical algorithms. That evening, as many team members took their first break in days, Frank found himself on the warehouse roof with Susan, looking at the stars. "One of those is your home?" she asked. "Yes," Frank replied, pointing to a faint star. "Though I haven't thought of it as home for some time now." Susan studied his face in the darkness. "You'll never be able to go back, will you? After helping us?" "No," Frank acknowledged. "The Council doesn't forgive betrayal." "I'm sorry," she said softly. Frank shook his head. "Don't be. For the first time, I'm making my own choices rather than following orders." Below them, humans continued working through the night, building defenses for a war most of their species didn't even know was coming. Their determination, creativity, and cooperation had surprised Frank daily. In his latest hidden personal journal entry, Frank wrote, "The Council believes advancement is measured by technology. They've missed something fundamental about evolution. Perhaps the capacity to unite against common threats is the true measure of a species' readiness for the galaxy." The first Proxian attack came without warning. At 3:42 a.m. Eastern Time, massive ships appeared in Earth's atmosphere over major cities. Their sleek, dark hulls absorbed light rather than reflected it, making them appear as moving voids against the night sky. Frank was awakened by blaring alarms in the command center. He rushed to the main monitoring station, where Greg and Diane were already coordinating the global response. "They're here," Greg said grimly, pointing to the screens showing radar images from around the world. "At least 30 harvester ships. Larger than you predicted." Frank studied the images with growing concern. "They've committed more resources than usual. They must consider Earth a high-value target." Outside, people were panicking as news spread of the alien ships. But in military bases and secret facilities around the world, trained teams were activating the defenses they had prepared based on Frank's intelligence. "Jamming systems are online," reported Jack from his station. "All units reporting successful deployment." On the screens, they watched as the Proxian ships began their standard harvesting pattern, descending toward population centers. Then something unexpected happened. The ships paused, their smooth approach becoming erratic. "It's working," Susan exclaimed. "They can't coordinate their attack." Frank nodded. "Their ships operate as a unified force. Without clear communications, each captain must make individual decisions." The disruption gave Earth's military forces precious time to launch their counterattack. Fighter jets scrambled worldwide, armed with missiles modified to target the specific vulnerabilities Frank had identified in Proxian shield systems. "First strike reports coming in," Greg announced. "Hits confirmed on ships over London, Beijing, and Cairo. Minimal effect on the main hulls, but their weapons systems are showing damage." Frank frowned. "They'll adapt quickly. The element of surprise won't last." He was right. Within an hour, the Proxian ships had adjusted their shields. The modified missiles were no longer effective. Several ships began firing energy weapons at major military installations, causing massive destruction. "We need to target their command ship," Frank said urgently. "Everything flows from there. If we can disrupt their central coordination, the entire attack pattern will collapse." "How do we identify the command ship?" asked Alan, who had been helping coordinate the tech teams. "It will be maintaining position above the equator," Frank explained, "likely over the Atlantic or Pacific to minimize exposure to your defensive systems." Satellite images confirmed Frank's prediction. A larger Proxian vessel was holding steady over the mid-Atlantic, maintaining distance from any land-based weapons. "That's our target," Frank said. "But your conventional weapons won't reach it." Ellen stepped forward. "The prototype might." Everyone turned to look at him. The prototype was an experimental spacecraft equipped with the electromagnetic pulse weapon they had developed specifically for Proxian technology. It had never been tested in actual combat. "It's not ready," Jack protested. "The shielding is incomplete. Whoever pilots it would be exposed to lethal radiation from the pulse." A heavy silence fell over the room. The mission would be suicide. "I'll do it," said Greg finally. "I've got flight training." "No," Frank said firmly. "I should go. I understand Proxian systems better than anyone. And," he hesitated, "I'm already betraying my people. This is my responsibility." After a brief but intense argument, they agreed. Frank would pilot the prototype, with Greg as backup pilot in case Frank couldn't complete the mission. As they prepared to leave for the launch site, Susan pulled Frank aside. "There has to be another way," she said, her voice breaking slightly. Frank shook his head. The council was wrong about many things, but they were right about one thing. Humans aren't ready to face Proxians alone. Not yet, but this might give you a chance. He looked around at the humans who had become his friends, working desperately to save their world. "The council needs to know what I've learned about your species," Frank said. "Win or lose, they need to understand what humans truly are." Frank climbed into the prototype spacecraft, his human form feeling strangely comfortable now after months on Earth. The experimental ship was a combination of Earth technology and his own knowledge of Proxian weaknesses, essentially a delivery system for the massive electromagnetic pulse weapon designed to disable the Proxian command ship. "Systems check complete," said Jack through the communication system. "Power levels optimal. The EMP is armed and ready." Frank's hands moved confidently over the controls. Though primitive by council standards, the craft represented humanity's remarkable adaptability, built in weeks when such technology should have taken years to develop. "Launch sequence initiated," Frank confirmed. "Targeting systems locked on Proxian command vessel." As the engines fired, Frank felt a moment of clarity. His mission had changed completely from what the council intended, yet he felt more purpose now than ever before. The prototype rose rapidly through the atmosphere. On radar screens below, Greg and Susan watched the small dot of their ship climbing toward the much larger Proxian command vessel. "He's on approach," Greg reported. "No signs that the Proxians have detected him yet." Susan gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white. "How long until he's in range?" 3 minutes, Greg answered. "Proxian defenses will detect him before then." In space, Frank guided the ship toward the massive Proxian vessel. Its dark hull absorbed starlight, making it appear like a void against the stars. He knew exactly what was happening on that ship. Proxian commanders directing the harvesting fleet, planning humanity's enslavement or extinction. His communication device suddenly activated, but it wasn't Earth calling. The Council's emergency frequency lit up his console. "Agent Zarax, we have detected your unauthorized activities," came the cold voice of his superior. "Extraction team dispatched. Cease all interaction with the target species immediately." Frank felt a chill. The Council was coming, not just for him, but to erase all evidence of their presence. That would include everyone who knew about him. Susan, Alan, Greg, and all the others. With new determination, Frank accelerated toward the Proxian ship. At the same time, he activated his emergency transmission system, a direct link to all council members simultaneously. "This is Agent Zarax," he began, speaking clearly as he piloted toward his target. "I am breaking protocol to deliver critical intelligence regarding humanity." The Proxian ship finally detected his approach. Energy weapons began firing, flashes of light streaking past his craft. "Humans are not what our intelligence suggested," Frank continued, dodging the attacks. "When faced with extinction, they united across traditional boundaries. They developed advanced countermeasures in weeks that should have taken centuries." His ship shuddered as a glancing hit damaged one wing. Warning lights flashed across his controls, but he maintained course. "Most importantly," Frank said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him, "they did not resort to the aggression or self-interest our models predicted. Instead, they demonstrated unprecedented cooperation, sacrifice, and ingenuity. The Proxian command ship loomed large in his viewport now. Its weapons were fully focused on his small craft, but he had almost reached the optimal position for the EMP. I recommend immediate reclassification of Earth as a protected world, Frank continued, knowing these might be his final words. Humans are not a threat to galactic stability. They are a potential ally with unique adaptive capabilities and moral reasoning that our council could learn from. Frank's fingers hovered over the EMP activation control. Just a few seconds more. My actions were taken to preserve a species worthy of existence. I accept full responsibility and any consequences under council law. With that, Frank pressed the activation button. The EMP weapon discharged, sending a massive energy wave toward the Proxian command ship. His own systems failed immediately, the radiation flooding his cabin. As consciousness faded, Frank's last thought was of Susan and the others watching from Earth. They would never know if his sacrifice worked, or if the council would heed his message. But far below, humans watched in awe as the massive Proxian command ship suddenly went dark, drifting powerless in orbit. Throughout the world, the harvester ships faltered and began retreating, their coordinated attack dissolving into confusion. And beyond Earth's atmosphere, council ships appeared, observing the scene with new understanding. Frank's final message had been received by all council members, bypassing the normal hierarchy. For the first time in council history, a unanimous emergency vote was cast. Earth would be classified as a protected world.